Joining us now from Ottawa is Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire. Most recently a retired senator, General Dallaire was a UN peacekeeper who bore witness to a genocide he was powerless to stop. He detailed his experiences in his book, Shake Hands with the Devil. General, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
When you went back to Rwanda in 2004 on the 10th anniversary of the genocide, you said it was like going back to hell. What are your feelings now, 20 years later?
Well, I was back, in fact, 3 years ago, operating out of there for my work on child soldiers and stopping the use of child soldiers in the Congo and South Sudan and going after Joseph Kony. I was lecturing, in fact, at their staff college in Rwanda. My feeling is that the nation, as far as its infrastructure and its system of governance that it's established, has evolved at an incredibly accelerated pace. It's provided enormous assets to its own people in regards to healthcare and education. It is a beacon of reference for forces that are being deployed in Africa and overseas, even in Haiti with peacekeepers. But there is still a significant tension in regards to the reconciliation and, of course, the ability of the government to feel comfortable with democracy, and so human rights tends to take sometimes a hit.
So do you get the sense that the country has not risen above the ethnic divisions that caused so much mayhem and death 21 years ago?
I would say that it's gotten on top of it. The question is, however, has it been able to make it become a full-fledged ethos of the nation? It's got still the threats from particularly the FDLN in the Congo, and with some of the extremist leaders who created genocide, who are still free in France and some in Belgium. So there's always that threat of a possibility of a renewal generated by these exterior forces that could undermine the peace in the country. So that keeps a certain paranoia inside the country. The second dimension is to what extent they're making enough room for the Hutu elites, or those who are educated and capable of filling functions, whether or not they're making enough room for them. And I think that's an ongoing process. And it's not, I mean, it's 20 years, so you got to say, are they as far as they could be in 20 years, or are they slowing, a bit behind? It's a judgment call right now, but it's not all resolved, that's for sure.
Of course, we have a new generation that is emerging right now, the so-called born-free generation. These are people, of course, who were born after the genocide. Does that give you hope that they will be able to overcome their differences, because they would not have had any direct experience of what happened 21 years ago?
I think that they can offer us enormous amount of optimism, as long as, in particular, the system of education remains objective. And that is to say that not only do you get a not necessarily religious-based education, but an education that has values, that has mores, and has ethical standards that it's inculcating in its young people. If you've got that as a start point, and you're permitting the young people to read the history as it happened in the most objective possible way, which the Center for, that is the Genocide Center in Kigali is trying to do in certain different sites. If you can get that solidly established, and lastly, if the revisionism that's going on is put in its place, I think that these young people will have a fair chance of pulling this country into a significant leadership role in, first of all, East Central Africa, and ultimately in Africa in itself.
General, taking you back to 2004, you were extremely angry and very frustrated at the time with the United Nations because of their inactions. You said that they failed to give you the troops that you needed to keep the peace. They failed to change the rules of engagement so that you could diffuse tensions in that country. Do you believe that the UN has changed now? Could this happen again?
Well, you know, it's just horrific of what I'm seeing going on in Liberia. I just come back from Jordan in the Syrian refugee camps where they're recruiting children to fight in Syria. I've seen the Liberian Libya operation and the fear of using responsibility to protect. And I would argue that massive atrocities are still ongoing, still possible, and that we should be less tolerant on the leadership of the world now than we were then, because we were stumbling into a whole new era of imploding nations, failing states, and civil wars. And we had come out of the sort of Eurocentric classic warfare construct, and we were ad hocing it. Now there's much more information. However, I'm not sure that the actual intestinal fortitude exists within the political elites of the world to want to engage, to want to take the risks of prevention of these catastrophes that are going on. I think that we got a hell of a lot of politicians who are risk averse, but we don't have a statesman amongst the gang who's willing to, in fact, take a leadership role in moving the yardsticks and implementing some of the reforms that have come over the last 20 years. So I think I'd hold people far more accountable now than we were then, because we were nearly blind and we were just testing the waters, while today we've got 20 years of experience and we're still fiddling.
General, on a more personal level, you revealed that those mass murders in Rwanda in 2004 left you with many problems. You suffered with sleep problems, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. You also harbored a lot of hatred, you said at the time. You said, "My hatred was beyond bounds," in a documentary. Do you still experience those ailments? Do you still harbor that kind of hatred that you felt at the time?
It's rather interesting that you asked me this question, because last night, about an hour and a half into my sleep, I was awakened by, even with the medication I take and nearly 16 years of therapy, I was awakened because I was in the midst of an ambush and an RPG was about to blow up my vehicle. And so this is 21 years later. Yes, I still hold a lot of animosity to the leadership of the world that abandoned the Rwandans. They abandoned the Rwandans first. Secondly, they abandoned the UN on the ground, who were warning them of this thing coming. And when it did happen, they still stayed away and tried to find all kinds of excuses not to engage because of the fear of casualties. And third, I hold, the Security Council, but mostly the Secretary General, Boutros-Ghali, accountable for not getting the message to the Security Council, and that Security Council not getting the message to their national capitals, because ultimately the ones that really failed us in the field was not because the Secretariat didn't have the information and wasn't trying to get it to the Security Council. It was because the nation states that made up the UN decided it wasn't going to invest in this sort of tribalism that they called it, and they hoped it would blow over. And so every nation state that had a capability of getting engaged and assisting us, they have the blood on their hands for non-intervention, non-prevention, non-intervention, and ultimately trying to buy their way out after.
General, thank you very much for joining us, sir.